Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining today's webinar, which is about the anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism compliance for designated non-financial businesses professionals, known as the DNFBPs in the UAE. First of all, just before I continue my introduction, I would like to apologize for the technical issues at the beginning of this webinar. This is when we go live usually, or when we are on an event live. This is when you get a glitch on the mic, or you get to do some technical repairs. But virtually, it's a bit of a different experience. So apologies for that, and thank you all for your patience. So today's webinar is brought to you jointly by the UAE Ministry of Economy and Refinitiv, which is the London Stock Exchange Data and Analytics Division. In the next 2 hours, we are going to hear from an impressive line of speakers who are joining us from the Ministry of Economy, the National Risk Assessment Committee, the Financial Intelligence Unit, known as the FIU, and Refinitiv. Our speakers are going to share with you the insights and guidance about topics related to today's theme. So basically, we are going to cover the role of the Ministry of Economy in regulating the DNFBPs. We are also going to talk about give an overview about the national risk assessment. And then the FIU is going to share the requirements for STR filings, feedback on reporting, and talking about the how and the why and in relation to the reporting. There will be some high-level guidance as well on the Go AML portal. We will close by also a demo on WorldCheck 1 portal as well, which is the Financial Risk and Global Compliance Screening tool. Just some housekeeping rules. The audience audio is on mute, just to ensure that the webinar runs smoothly. And towards the end of the session, we are going to dedicate time for Q&A. So basically, if you would like to address any question to a particular speaker, just go on the Q&A icon on top, the tab, and type in your question, and we will do our best to answer most of your questions, if time permits, towards the end of the discussion. And now allow me to introduce our speakers for today. They have a long-standing experience in the subject matter field, but I'm going to be, for the sake of time, introducing them briefly for you today. If you would like to learn more about their bios, you can go on the website and read more about their experiences. So join me in welcoming Mrs. Safiya Astafi. Safiya is the Director of Anti-Money Laundering Department at the UAE's Ministry of Economy, and she recently joined the Ministry of Economy to establish the new AML Department. In her capacity, Safiya is leading the supervision process on designated non-financial businesses and professions, which is your sector. And also join me in welcoming Huda Belhol. Huda is the head of the National Risk Assessment Committee at the Executive Office of the AML CFT. Huda has well-rounded experience at the federal level in multiple areas: operations, custom controls, custom affairs, strategic planning, among many more, and all to maintain a high standard of performance and business ethics. Welcome Mohammed Sultan Janahi. Mohammed is the head of AML Supervision Section at the AML Department of the UAE Ministry of Economy. Mohammed was also a financial services regulator at the Dubai Financial Services Authority, known as the DFSA. And he was responsible for supervision and authorization of banks, brokers, advisors, asset managers, and fintech providers. Join me also in welcoming Sabur Siddiqui. Sabur is the Senior Analyst at the Operational Analysis Section of the Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU. He has financial crime compliance experience from both ends, having worked in the industry as well as with the FIU, and he possesses a strong working knowledge of FATF recommendations, regulations, and current issues in the region. And join me also in welcoming Muhammad Jubran Khan. Muhammad is the Senior Business Development Manager heading our MENA team. He focuses on empowering businesses with trusted, timely, critical financial and risk data at London Stock Exchange Group. And I would want to introduce myself as well. My name is Samah Nuruddin, and I am the Regional Specialist for Customer and Third-Party Risk in EMEA, representing Refinitiv, the Data and Analytics Division of London Stock Exchange Group. And now, without further delays, I would like to introduce the opening remarks that are going to be presented to us by Mrs. Safiya Al-Safi. Safiya, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours for the next 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you, Samah, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. And I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar and accept our apology for the technical issue we faced. I will make my speech very short just to catch up and have more questions from your side. I'm Safiya Al-Safi, Director of Anti-Money Laundering Department in Ministry of Economy. And this is a new established department within Ministry of Economy because of the new mandate, and Ministry of Economy is now the regulatory body supervised designated non-financial professions and businesses, DNFBPs. This word, you will hear it a lot next period. DNFBPs is certain or dedicated activities or businesses which are chosen by FATF and also a national risk assessment within UAE. These businesses are very key businesses for anti-money laundering deducting. They are real estate agents and dealers in precious metal and precious stones, independent accountants and auditors, also lawyers and public notary publics, and also legal consultancy companies and service providers companies. These kind of businesses are focused now to implement the regulations of UAE in AML, or anti-money laundering, and combating terrorist financing. How they are implementing this? We have our legislation within UAE. We have Federal Law number 20 of 2018, and we have also the Cabinet decision of number 10 of 2019, conducting or having all procedures these companies to follow. Internal procedures to be implemented within these companies to be compliant with these procedures. And the role of Ministry of Economy is to make sure that these companies are doing these procedures. You are our partners to mitigate the risk of anti-money laundering, and you will also be the safeguards for the business environment within UAE. And also during this webinar, we will explain more about what is required from you and how you will report the suspicious transactions or activities within your business. And by this way, you will be partners with us to mitigate that risk and also to reduce anti-money laundering process as much as possible. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope that you will benefit from this webinar. And the mic back to you, Samah. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Safiya, for your insightful introductory remarks. And now I would like just to maybe ask the team to share my slides. I will give a quick introduction on the chronology of the regulations for DNFBPs from a global to a local landscape perspective. We will also explore how your sector basically can be vulnerable to financial crimes. And we can talk high level what businesses need to look at when they want to mitigate AML and CFT risks. So basically, in terms of let me just make sure first of all the slides are there. Ahmad, can you give me a thumbs up if the slides are up and running for the audience? Perfect. So we can go to the second slide, which is sorry, the third slide. Yeah, one more. Thank you. Yes, that's it. Thank you. So basically, if you want to think about the history of when the DNFBPs were basically regulated, now in the late 1990s, there was like heightened AML and CFT regulations and legislations on the credit and financial services sector, and followed by also more advanced procedures. So then in response to the countermeasures, most of the money launderers, they started to resort to a different or alternative channel to conceal their criminal revenues, and they started to look at the non-financial services sectors and channels. Now, in response to this particular trend, the intergovernmental organization known as FATF identified that trend and then flagged the non-financial sector as a risky sector for money laundering and terrorist financing. So therefore, it extended its AML and CFT standards and recommendations to include that sector which you represent today. Now, in terms of definitions, it is it's the designated non-financial businesses and professionals. They include the real estate, lawyers, notaries, legal professionals, accountants, high-value dealers such as precious stones and metals, and corporate service providers as well as trusts. The FATF also adds to that sector the casinos as well. If we can move to the next slide, please. If we want to think about the regulations in general for this particular sector, it's not new. It's been there for the past 16 years. So once this trend was identified, the FATF in 2003, they included the AML CFT compliance in their recommendations. And then it was followed by the governments, which is, for example, the EU. So the EU, they did also release in their anti-money laundering directives, which is the directive that they have that regulates the AML and CFT and give that guidance for the member states. They also included the DNFBPs in 2005, in particular in their third AML directive. And I've just, listed for you also what business types is included in there. Now, naturally, the EU usually includes new enhancements into the for the AML directive, and when they do that, they look at certain enhancements also related to regulating the DNFBP sector. So, for example, they did reduce the value of the transaction that qualifies for due diligence. They did that in the fourth AML. I think they dropped it from 15,000 euros to 10,000 euros. And they also introduced a new business type in the sector, which is the AMP. They did that back in 2018, which stands for Art Marketplace Participants. So they also identified the art business as also vulnerable to financial crime. For example, a painting which is 10K euro will also, in terms of anyone involved in that transaction as stakeholders, they also need to they will be subject to AML regulations and compliance. Now, of course, the EU asked the member states to transpose these directives as national laws as well, and therefore, the non-financial sector will need to comply with those as such. Now, if we go locally, we're talking about the UAE. We all know that the national risk assessment by FATF has happened recently for the UAE. And of course, when there is a national risk assessment, usually FATF, they produce a MER, which we call it a mutual evaluation report. And in the mutual evaluation report, there were recommendations as well to extend the AML CFT compliance to the DNFBPs. And of course, there are reasons for that. The UAE is considered as the global hub for oil, precious stones exports. The UAE also, in terms of geopolitical location, is at proximity to high risk jurisdictions. And the UAE is actually the hub, and it's a very attractive financial hub for trades, for free zones. So a lot of international, traffic comes to the UAE, and therefore there is a proactivity from the UAE economy, Ministry of Economy, to kind of like tackle the risks that would be related to the DNFBPs. And proactively that happened, and there were like amendments to the federal law of the AML and CFT to be extended as well to the DNFBPs. Now, if we can move to the next slide, please. So here we are just going to explore how your sector would be vulnerable to financial crime. So first of all, let's take a step back and think what is, for example, money laundering, or what kind of financial crimes we're talking about. Now, the money laundering is a crime. But it's the second crime. There's always a first crime. That is a crime of, for example, related to money coming out from drug deals, narcotics, war crimes, corruption, fraud, trafficking, environmental crimes. There is, of course, a bucket of these, crimes. So this is where the first crime that the criminal would be doing and getting a lot of money out of that. And then the second crime is how can I do the money laundering? Because I need to ensure that I am injecting my dirty money, whether in the financial services sector or the non-financial services sector, and bounce back that money through legitimate sources. And of course, I'm sure that you're aware of the different phases of that. So we have the placement, where I inject the dirty money, and then I have the layering, where I basically run through complex transactions just to disconnect the money from the source. And then there will be the integration, where the money bounced back to me as clean from legal sources. Now we can explore together how, by just giving high-level examples, how each, a business type can be vulnerable to such activities. So if we talk, for example, about the real estate, I can, for instance, be a criminal. I have a lot of money. I can just buy and inject that in buying properties. And when I buy the property, I can lease it. So basically, the money will bounce back to me from legitimate source, which is the leasing part. Or, for example, I buy an overvalued or undervalued property, where I can also agree with the collaborative agent to give me, the difference under the table, which means that I am cleaning part of that money, which is the difference. Or I can, for example, buy a property, and the property will go through renovation, and then I can even get a better value out of that, because it can be sold at a higher value. Or I can basically own a financing company and a property or land, and I can flow I can flow the money basically by the financing company giving the mortgage, and I pay back, so that money flows and it looks legitimate as well. These are just types of how the real estate can be utilized or used for financial crime. It is considered one of the highest risk among the DNFBP sector, along with the second one that I'm going to talk about. It's the precious stones as well. Because you will have, dirty money, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to buy precious stones, diamonds, gold, and any kind of, precious metals. And the thing about these are like very easily to be physically smuggled outside the country or to another jurisdiction. They can be, it's not easy to detect that. And when we do that, you are able to, and they keep their value. So basically, they can be sold after years, either in the same value and sometimes more. So therefore, it's also a very attractive channel for money launderers. Now, the rest of the business types that relates to the company service providers, notaries, lawyers, legal professionals, etc., they sit in the bucket where they help in hiding the ultimate beneficiary owner and the identity of criminals. So, for example, a trust can be acting as the front line, and it will buy the property or do the transaction on behalf of another company that they represent. And that company can have 3 ultimate beneficiary owners where 2 are clean and 1 is a criminal. But still, that hierarchy and that kind of network you will not see. You only see the front company, the trust company. And the same thing for legal professionals, because what basically they do, they can act on behalf of others. That would be, the shareholders on another company or the UBOs. So basically, if any of those are at high risk, we will not see that because there is a front liner who sits there and performing all the transactions on behalf of a company or on behalf of an individual. Now, if we want to think about that and take just some time to reflect, if we have the financial crime on one side, and we need to take into consideration that the the criminals are becoming well-funded, very well organized, and creative in the techniques that they do their concealment of criminal revenues, and we face that with a vulnerable, weak KYC and AML control. Of course, the results will not be something that any business would want. The implications of risk there will lead to either fines or regulatory enforcement, imprisonment as well, legal complications, and most importantly, I would say that runs in the speed of light these days is the reputational damage. So these are just types of how the types of risk that you kind of think your business would want to avoid. And if you can go to the next slide, please. This is where I will focus on just also, again, high level of what would be possibly ways or methods to mitigate the risk. So I would say there will be for the business to look at a backbone, which is the compliance function. So that's the backbone of the whole AML CFT compliance. And of course, the compliance function will be responsible for many duties in the business relates to regulatory compliance, looking at the internal policies, bringing those together to put the policies of the business. In terms of also the procedures that will be the practicalities reflecting on these policies, and the controls that would be providing that level of efficiency in your data and technology when it comes to complying with the regulations and internal policies. And then I would talk about the training program, because at the end of the day, you would need to have to create a compliance culture, irrespective if you're talking about the senior management or you're talking about the frontliner. You want them all to be aware and aligned on the concept of money laundering, and the training program can be tailored based on their role. So you would not expect, for example, the senior management to know every nitty details, but you would expect, for example, the compliance team to have that, and the frontliner at least to be exposed to cases like for money laundering, so they can know how to detect them because they are in direct contact with their customers, and, for example, to know how and where to report that. The customer due diligence is another program that is very important for your business or any business. Basically, is when you are putting together the KYC procedures and the controls that are going to back that up. So basically, do I know that customer? Do I know that company? It's not like I am being referred by someone saying, "Oh, this is a good company." No, we need to verify their documents, their ultimate beneficiary owners. We need to do the financial and compliance risk just to ensure that the company, the shareholders, or anyone involved in that business transactions, or when we are onboarding them, they are not on a watch list, for example, on a blacklist, whether locally or globally. We also need to ensure that when we are, doing these transactions, we are monitoring any suspicious transactions in there in order to report it, analyze it, and flag anything suspicious about it. We also need to maintain the relationship as well in a compliant manner. So, for example, if we onboard that customer, or if we are about to finish a transaction and it takes some time, which means that we are still interacting with this business, you probably need to do that ongoing monitoring on these businesses and these people that are these clients to ensure that nothing comes down the road alerting you that you have a high risk company or a high risk beneficiary owner or customer. And finally, I would conclude with the ongoing testing. So the ongoing testing is, for example, if you're a business and you operate, let's say, locally, you would adhere to the local regulation and your internal policies. But you also want to ensure that your policies, procedures, and controls that are in place are efficient. Efficient in the terms that if you want to expand to new jurisdictions, or if you want to add new products to your customers, or you want to expand to new customers, sometimes also, it would be adhering to different regulatory requirements locally and regionally. You need to ensure that your controls, they are catering for that. And therefore, you need an external assessment or an ongoing risk assessment as well to ensure that your program is always providing a level of efficiency and not just a tick in the box. So I hope my presentation gave you some good insights and laid an introduction for today's session. And now what I would do is I will hand into Muhammad Al-Janahi and Huda Belhol, who are going to cover the role of the UAE Ministry of Economy in regulating your sector, and an overview of the national risk assessment. Muhammad, good morning. Huda, good morning. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much. If I can have my slides, please put up. Okay. But until they have the slides up, I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance today, and again, apologies for the technical errors. Following Safiya's keynote on the ministry's role, I'd like to just expand a little bit on the basic requirements that we expect to see during our supervisory visits, and also as part of the periodic information requests that we will be making. Such requirements are expected to be in place. Also, I'd like to just show you a quick glimpse of the structure of the Aml Department and how the process works. We're just waiting for the slides. Okay, here we are. As my colleagues earlier has explained, the ministry has been appointed as the supervisory body for the DNFBP sector, which is these 4 sectors that you see here on the screen. There are the implementing regulations of the AML law also provides legislation to allow the Ministry of Economy to include other sectors if need be to the list of the DNFBPs. So from a regulatory framework, those legal powers are there based on the ongoing studies of the national risk assessment. Other sectors can be added. If we can move to the next slide, please. So this is the structure of the Aml Department. It starts with the policies and risk. This is where we conduct sectoral studies. We form our policies towards supervision, licensing, enforcement, the brains of the Aml Department, and the thinking behind our work. And then we move to the AML supervision, which is the operational and implementation part of the ministry's AML objectives. We conduct periodic on-site inspections or risk assessments. We risk assess the entire population to ensure that we have an understanding on the nature of risk that each entity poses on these objectives, as well as in terms of compliance with requirements. And finally, we have the enforcement section, which accepts referrals from supervision and conducts independent investigations. We will talk more about the role of each of supervision and enforcement later in these slides. So the key role of the ministry is to combat money laundering, of the ministry's Aml Department is to combat money laundering, terrorist financing, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And as Safiya, my colleague Safiya indicated, those entities listed as DNFBPs have been identified as being vulnerable for misuse by individuals or companies trying to commit those three crimes, and that's why appropriate regulations have been put in place to ensure that those entities that provide such services are not being misused. We see the private sector, particularly those 4 entities, to be our partners and gatekeepers alongside us, and we encourage the ongoing cooperation that we have and relationship that we have with them, such as attending ongoing dialogue and attending these webinars that we can engage and look for and try to formulate policy together. If we can move forward to the next slide, please. So from the basic requirements that we expect to see in a DNFBP, it's implementation of the risk-based approach. And that starts with the DNFBP having an understanding of the nature of risks that it's and how it's vulnerable to those risks. And this can be done by conducting a study, an internal risk assessment, looking at the products and services that the entities offering, the countries or geographies that the country deals with or has suppliers or clients from, the nature of the customers, what they do, and what their business is, as well as the delivery channels. In addition, and this is where my colleague Huda Bilhol from the Executive Office will come in. During conducting the internal risk assessment, the DNFBP needs to take into consideration the results of the national risk assessment. I will hand over to my colleague Huda before coming back to you and continuing the basic requirements, just to share with you an overview of the national risk assessment and how a DNFBP should take into account those results while conducting its own internal risk assessment. Huda, if you don't mind.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending this meeting. And sorry of the technical issue, but I hope that you benefit from this discussion and improving your procedures and regarding AMLTF. Regarding the risk assessment, and we have a program for the outreach for the private sector, and we are happy to share with you later on the document that explains the requirement about the risk assessment. Based on FATF, the main thing for any DNFBPs is how they should conduct their work based on a risk-based approach. Of course, they have identified some high-risk areas, but with good, solid risk-based approach system that each company adopts, your work will become easy. I was going through most of the Q&A, and they are saying, what should we do? We have a precious metal. What can we handle? What kind of information? What can we do if we have cash? I understand your concern and I understand your issue about this one. So for us here is just announced that I can share. If you will allow me just 1 second, I'll share. Okay, this is the document that we are happy to show you. Of course, UAE have started the national risk assessment and they have identified some risk areas that we should not stop, but we should monitor and enhance and mitigate this risk to make sure that we have a better understanding and how can we improve it. One of the risks is, I know it's gold, but gold area, but it's a risk in everywhere. But what can we do is implement Ministry of Economy requirement and have a solid due diligence, which Ministry of Economy later on will explain, have a reporting, and you're fine. So we are not here to scare you when we say risk, but we are here encouraging you to have a participation in understanding your business and how can you protect it from anybody trying to abuse it. So the risk assessment, the NRA have identified the risk based on the 21 predicate offenses in UAE. And we have analyzed the risk based on the actor capacity, the scope of Aml activity, the proceed of crime. And we found that the highest crimes in UAE is fraud, counterfeiting, illicit traffic of narcotic, professional or third party money laundering. And I know some of you will ask, what do you mean by professional third party money laundering? That they will use your company to money launder through you to other company, or they will use a company will be established just for money laundering and will use your good company to enhance their or clean their money. So what we did in the risk assessment, the vulnerability was inherent character, nature of product and service, nature of client, geographic reach, and nature of delivery channels. And we found that the highest inherent vulnerable in the UAE is banking, providing money service or exchange house, dealer and precious metals. That doesn't mean that your sector is doing or that handling money laundering, but we are saying you might be exposed to people who try to use your business to money laundering. So you need to establish your system to protect yourself. The medium high, we found lawyers, real estate agents, company service provider, dealer with precious metal, as well as financial advisor, investment broker, and credit provider. As you can see, dealers with precious metal is high and medium high, so it's both how they handle it. The second one is medium, which is auditor and life insurance, property and cost, general insurance, and medium high. From the financial free zone, we found banking, broker agents, wealth management, and financial advisor. So we have all the details regarding the NRA in the paper, and we are happy to share it with you and listen to you. Based on FATF recent risk assessment of UAE or recent evaluation of UAE, they have identified some improvement, and we took it with a happy heart, saying, let's do it. One of them, they thought requests from UAE or advise UAE, they have a sectorial risk assessment. One of the things that we've done is terrorist financing risk assessment. And the most found that the indicator or scenarios that might be abused in UAE for terrorist financing is fundraising through social media. So you have to be very careful, and I think we have done a very well campaign advising everybody not to get any money through social media or any fund being raised through social media. Collecting funds through crowd funds technology. We have a crowd funds here in UAE, but we are saying you need to make sure if you are going to start to collect money through crowd funds, that the money coming from any person is legitimate and you do your own due diligence. Fundraising through virtual assets. Of course, there's a threat now rising everywhere that terrorists are using virtual assets. Also donation, non-profit organization, and by abusing the non-profit organization, trade activities, selling goods through terrorist network, and purchase goods and services from terrorist network, legal entity, and fund transfer from high-risk jurisdiction, which is the most important to your sector, since you are dealing with different countries. You are a trader and you deal with different countries. What happened is that they try to transfer the fund from high-risk jurisdiction without having the proper due diligence, and especially for gold, since you have to deal with countries that might be abused by terrorist groups, for example, Congo, and you need to be very careful from where you import the gold and who you are handling this money to protect your trade and make it legitimate. Ownership or control over UAE financial institution, money transfer, smuggling of gold, of cash, and investment financial management is also one of the things that we found that might be abused of terrorists. Trade financial section, targeted financial section, sanctions. Of course, as you know, based on the UN resolutions, we have two main resolutions. The one is regarding Taliban and Daesh, and the other one is regarding Iran and North Korea. And we have UAE Cabinet Resolution number 74 of 2020 that have identified that it is required of all the MPPs to report any and check and do their due diligence and report if this person has been listed in UN sanctions. So this is a targeted financial sanctions. You have to make sure that your money or the person you are dealing with is not related to any person listed in the UN resolution. So we have identified the main list that we are focusing on. In addition of that, other UN resolutions or sanctions that have been related, and we need to focus on it and monitor it. And we have added the entities that you need to follow regarding it and what should you do. Finally, later on is legal entity risk assessment. By that we mean there might, without the information of beneficial owner of this company, we cannot identify if this company been abused or not. So by providing this information for Ministry of Economy, you are helping us and you, and it's just a partnership between a public and a private sector to make sure that we provide the right information and protect UAE and protect your business. So I encourage you and hope that you provide the full information regarding the beneficial ownership information to Ministry of Economy or any registrar in your area, to make sure that nobody's going to abuse your system. So we have identified that it is important to provide this kind of information. Finally, my favorite sector is gold. There's a red flag we have identified for you as a gold sector, and it is considered the second biggest trading sector in UAE, and we are here to support the gold sector. We are not here to scare the gold sector. We are here to support you and to make sure that we are here to get you the best business that you require, but at the same time we are here to protect you from anybody to abuse you. We have identified some red flag for you to help you to identify any misbehavior For example, non-reporting to the FIU. If you find you are going to do a business with a company and this company is not registered in the Go AML or in any important program like the UN program, which we have it in the Executive Office of Goods, then this company is suspicious. You don't do deal with it. You need a company that's willing voluntarily to have a reporting in the FIU, and volunteering is willing to check every customer they are dealing with, because it's a list. And I'm telling you, it has been a lot for us, telling us that this company is dealing with a company that is under suspicious, and please let us do business with them. But it's not. The sanction or any fine will come also on you. So we are here to protect you. We are here to prevent any action might have over you. We want your business to expand in UAE. We want your business to have a good, clean work ethics. And this document will be provided for you. I hope we tried as much as we can to provide you with the best red flag that you should take it in consideration when you deal with gold. And finally is the real estate. I identified just the two top businesses that we need to focus on with the respect of the remaining businesses, but these two businesses is having a high turnover in UAE, and we need to protect it, and we need to encourage them to get more businesses, but the right businesses. So also here we have identified the red flags that we want the real estate to focus on the next period and make sure that they have a good, solid system and a productive one at the same time. So this is from my side. I hope that I didn't bore you, and I hope that if you have any question, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you. I give back the floor for Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you, Huda. I think that was an excellent overview of how to implement the risk-based approach and to support you while conducting your internal risk assessment. If I could please have the slides back, and we can continue with the basic requirements. Okay. So moving on to the client onboarding. Which is in the next slide, please. So in terms of the manner in which DNFBPs are expected to onboard clients, there should be a three-stage process whilst a DNFBP conducting business with a new client, and that process, it's good to document that process as part of your policies and procedures. Can we please move to slide 6? So until the slides come up, I'll just go briefly over them. The three-stage process starts with the KYC, which is knowing your client, which is exactly what banks do. When we go and open bank accounts with them, they try to get to know us, and this is what the DNFBP should do with its clients. Collect the appropriate information that it needs, and basically, based on that information, conduct a customer risk assessment, and that's the second stage. So the first is collecting the data, the KYC, and then conducting the customer risk assessment, understanding the risk of that customer. Is it a low risk, a medium risk, a high risk customer? And you can arrive to that decision based on the nature of the customer's business, the geographies that the customer deals with. So that's why it's important to conduct your internal risk assessment first. It will enable you to conduct your customer risk ratings. So they're all, the process is connected in that sense, because you will know what you would consider high risk and medium risk and low risk based on your internal risk assessment. So if you see those risks evident in a client while conducting that, the second stage, the customer risk rating, then you will know that this is a high risk customer. And then after you risk rate the customer, you move to the customer due diligence, which is basically the checks and screenings that you have to do on the client. Now, you have to do more for a high risk client than what you have to do for a low risk client. If you rated somebody as high risk, you need to ask more information about their business. You need to verify their information using your own sources, whether official sources online or having systems. And you don't have to get any systems, but solutions are out there. But there are no requirements to do so. However, it helps in conducting the due diligence to have software that allows you to search on the background of your client. But again, if a customer is low risk, let's say it's a listed company or having low risk activities based on your understanding of risks, then less needs to be done in terms of that verification process. So that's what a risk-based approach is. Just like we have to implement a risk-based approach as regulators, an entity has to also apply a risk-based approach in doing its business. Moving to the next slide, to the next basic requirement. Suspicious activity reporting. My colleague Sabur from the Financial Intelligence Unit will provide more detail on this, but as you all must be aware by now, DNFBPs must register on the GoAML platform to enable them to report suspicious transactions. In order to know what's suspicious, you have to have a list of red flags, just like what Huda, my colleague Huda just showed us. And my colleague Sabur will also show you more on those red flags. The key important aspect here is, firstly, having the list of red flags is a legal requirement. In the implementing regulations of the law, you will see that having those indicators is required. And the indicators differ per sector. So if you're a real estate entity, or if you're a legal consultant, or a company service provider, or a dealer of precious metals, your red flag indicators are different because your business is different, your risks are different, and the nature of your customers are different. So this is why you need to tailor-make your list of red flags. And no one knows your business more than you. You know how you can be taken advantage of. We cannot tell you about the detailed aspect of your business because it's yours, and you understand it better than us. So compiling that list of red flags, sharing it with your staff, training them on it on an ongoing basis, and also refreshing it. And you might come across new areas that you might find that might be used for money laundering, and you can add such scenarios to your list of red flags. And train your staff to understand that if you come across that situation on the list of red flags, then you should ask more questions. If you couldn't find a question to an answer to your questions, you file a report for a suspicious activity report ongoing. If you could move to the next slide, please. And as just to follow on from my colleague Huda, there is a local terrorist list, and then there's the United Nations Security Council sanctions list. You can obtain those lists online from the United Nations Security Council website. It's a good Google search. You can download that document and refresh it on an ongoing basis. Search using, if you can do it manually. We don't want to add more costs to your business. So this is a way of doing it. It's not the best way, but you can merely download the list and manually search for if any of your clients is on those lists. There's also the website of the Committee for Commodities Subject to Import and Export Control. Registering on their platform will give you automatic updates when those lists have been changed. It's very important that you complete your registration on their website. While it's not required, I'd like to reiterate, there's no requirement to have a system in place, but it will make your life easier in terms of not having to do the process manually. If you can move to the next slide, please. Amongst the basic requirements as set out by the implementing regulations, DNFBPs should provide training to their staff, whether through their compliance officer or seeking external vendors or even online training courses. It's important that training is tailored to your business, as we indicated earlier about the red flags, and those should be shown to your clients, to your staff. Sorry, and ensure that it's to repeat the basic information, but also add the changing aspects of your industry to your training on an ongoing basis, because it's periodic and you have to demonstrate that for us when we conduct an inspection, that you have actually trained your staff, and there's evidence of that. Record keeping, as you're aware, it's a 5-year period minimum as per the implementing regulations. All records in terms of your client, your screening, the transaction monitoring activities which you conducted, all these should be kept retained by you for a minimum period of 5 years. And lastly, and this will help you a lot, it's conducting a periodic. Now, we're not saying it has to be annual. It's periodic, as when and how you see fit. You might need it every year. Others might need it less often. So an audit will help you identify where you have weaknesses in your policies and procedures and help you remediate them. This is a requirement in the implementing regulations, and if you're still in the process of actually putting in place your systems and controls, it's good to get an auditor in or a compliance consultant with experience in AML requirements to explain to you where your weaknesses are and to help you set up your systems and controls. If you can move to the next slide, please. As promised earlier, in terms of our supervisory approach here at the Ministry of Economy, so we touched upon on-site inspections that we do. We would contact you a few days before the inspection to ask for certain information, such as your policies and procedures, the list of your clients, and see how you conducted your internal risk assessment. We will review those internally and then prepare ourselves for our on-site visit, where we will look at your client files, we'll interview the relevant staff, and we will assess your compliance to the requirements and assess the controls that you have in place. We will then provide you with a report of our inspection and whether or not we identified issues. Now, during those inspections, if we identify issues that we deem to be high risk and or breaches or major breaches to the requirements, we may make a decision to refer the entity to enforcement, and where investigation might be conducted and fines might be levied. But that is not always the case. If we see an entity has put the effort into compliance, has put the energy and committed into complying with the requirements, even if we identified breaches, then we wouldn't make a referral. We will actually try to work with the entity to remediate the deficiencies, to ensure that they have the right controls in place. So we need to see the effort, we need to see the energy. We will no longer accept the I didn't know response, and that's what we have gotten recently. That a lot of DNFBPs claim lack of knowledge about the requirements, or lack of knowledge about the fact they have to do this. But it needs this is no longer acceptable given the amount of awareness that's happening, whether on the media or directly from regulators across the country. You can move to the next slide, please. Those are the enforcement powers which were touched upon earlier. Fines can range from 50,000 to 5 million. And those are administrative, of course, fines. However, breaches to and committing AML crimes, that can be litigated in courts, and it might also, in addition to the fines, it might include jail time. But the ministry's role is administrative, and those criminal aspects of the law is the responsibility of the law enforcement agencies. Okay. I would like to hand over back to my colleagues at Refinitiv now, and we'll take any questions you might have after the presentations are done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muhammad, and thank you very much, Huda, as well. As you sense that the direction is always to be supporting the businesses while mitigating the risk. So I hope that the audience, you had great insights as key takeaways from Muhammad's and Huda's introductions and presentations. I'm gonna now introduce Sabur Siddiqui, who is going to speak about the suspicious transaction reports, about the hows, the whys, and how to report, and high-level guidance as well on the Go AML portal. Sabur, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, good afternoon, everybody, and it's good to see you in abundant attendance. And I'd like to start by thanking the team at Refinitiv for hosting such a great webinar. Apologies for the technical snags in the between. But I'd like to begin with commending the Ministry of Economy for the effort they have put in the last year. So much so that, just to put some numbers, it took the financial regulators years to onboard something about 250 banks and exchanges houses to report suspicious transactions or to put them onto the portal which we had then. But Ministry of Economy, along with their other stakeholders, and of course all of you guys who are licensed by them, took just about a year to onboard 10,000 entities successfully onto the GoAML platform, which is extremely commendable. And I have to congratulate Mohammed, Safia, and the entire team for that, because this is a watershed scenario. Never it has been happened in any country, at least in the region. I would say that within a short span of time, the outreach has been so clear. And also I have to congratulate the licensed entities for being symbiotic in that effort and putting in their effort to sign up, which is great, of course, and especially in the wake of the ongoing mutual evaluation. This is something we think that we'll be appreciated for, and the efforts won't go in vain. Also, I would take this chance to commend the NRA, that is Huda and the team and the all subcommittees of the NRA, because I would like to emphasize that the 24-page document which she was projecting during her presentation, I know what has gone behind the scenes to compile that. It's been an extensive research, talking to a lot of entities, consultants, and on-ground situation just to compile that document to give you what exactly have been the typologies or the burning fires, which of course we have to address in time, but it would be good to pay a lot of heed in that document. Then moving on, if you could just move to the next slide, is of course the reason I volunteered or the FIU volunteered to go for a live webinar. We could have just sent you a notice and we could have just sent you a circular and the PPT. But I wanted to address the community directly and invoke a sense of the responsibility which is on the way right now. So all that is good and all that is highly appreciated, that the amount of signups we have had on GoML has been to the amount of at least 10,000 entities, or rather in excess of it. But a part of the concern is corresponding to the number of registrations, we have not had a proportional level of filings. So now is the time for the reporting entities to realize that now having signed up, what is the next step? You're not just signed up to tick the checkbox approach, as Sama said in the earlier part of the presentation. It's for you to utilize this platform and report financial crime right now. So I would like to talk about the obligations which the reporting entities have to file the suspicious reports and other kinds of reports into the FIU using GoML. Now, in principle, you guys have some obligations to report these into the GoML. First of all is the legal obligation, which is the mandate, and which of course Mohammed and the team have elaborated upon. But more than the legal obligation, just for the sake of doing it to have your license and not being fined, is something what the approach should not be. What I wanted to invoke is a sense of responsibility you have, which is above and beyond just meeting the legal obligation, right? First of all, as much as we are all proud of being UAE nationals or residents, our businesses have thrived in UAE, we have earned our livelihood, especially when the mutual evaluation is going on, and especially when certain pieces of Western media point out fingers that these sectors, which are integral sectors of the DNFBP, the gold, as Huda was mentioning, the jewelry, the real estate, they have unfortunately brought in some negative press, saying that UAE probably, it's easy for money launderers and bad players to get the illicit funds and buy real estate and gold in UAE. But it's upon us now that we defy that kind of allegations. And how would you define that is you do your part. You report whatever is suspicious to you and whatever you think by the principles governing your own sector is suspicious or alarming. The next part is on us. What do we do with it? So the slide which is on your screen is, it says that you have to report immediately, right? Do not think in any kind of reporting, there are two aspects which are very vital: the timeliness of reporting and the accuracy of reporting. You are very accurate, but where you're very late doesn't help. Or if you are very timely, but your report essentially gives no intelligence, we just fall between the two stools and it's no good. So both the qualities have to be symbiotic and have to be hand in hand, which is timeliness and accuracy. And the third kind of obligation is not an obligation, but I would say it's a moral responsibility. Now, I want you guys to just sit and think about this. We all think that terrorism is something very high risk and it's something really bad, it's really concerning, and so is proliferation of nuclear weapons. These both things are equally bad, but something which is, plundering more people living on the earth is this money laundering thing. Now you must think this phenomenon of money laundering, it has impact on more people than what terrorism and some kind of circumvention of sanctions might have. What it does is, you think of it, money laundering on a macro level impoverishes the countries which are already poor and the gap between the richer and the poor just increases, which impacts somehow maybe our known ones or loved ones or our family. So it's imperative upon us to understand that if we do not report voluntarily, as in knowingly or unknowingly, we are being hand in glove with the financial criminals, and that is what you don't want to be. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Gibran? What do you have to report? Now, I do understand that since you guys are not having very elaborate compliance regimes and sophisticated compliance tools, but it's imperative for you guys to understand that what's risky, what's suspicious, and develop some kind of regime of compliance. Now, the two kinds of solutions for that. We have had, like Mohammed was telling, that we have had correspondences through the message board and emails that I am the person in the law firm, I am running a one-man show, I am the chairman, I am the legal secretary, I am the only one person, I am the compliance officer, and hence I do not have the time and resource to report these activities or to sign up. So for us, that's not an excuse. Having, as Mohammed was saying, you must have the knowledge, but you also must have the resources. Those resources can be manpower, or if you do not want to hire manpower, you have to use technology. And there are solutions available for you to put in rules and alerts which basically act upon the kind of services and kind of products you offer, and then try to help you in figuring out what's suspicious or what's abnormal, what's unusual in terms of a transactional activity or a behavior of a customer. So all these have to be reported. Now, I'll also refer to the guides which we have, which try to detail all the kinds of reports. At times, it's suspicious transaction report where you just know the transaction, it's from party A to party B, and you report that. In absentia of all those details, you can report a suspicious activity. Now, I do understand from a lot of engagement from dealers in precious metals that a lot of questions about DPMSR. Now, for you guys, we recently had a workshop on that. So DPMSR, which is a report for reporting a sale more than 55,000 in cash of precious metals and gemstones, that's a legal obligation. That's not reporting suspicious reports. Please treat them differently. Reporting something suspicious could be for as low as 2 dirhams to 5 million dirhams. So we will address the topic of DPMSR separately because this webinar is about suspicious transactions and suspicious activities. Jibran, can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, as I said, that all the kinds of companies, entities, DNFBPs have their different customer base and different products and services which they offer. So the kind of financial crime vulnerabilities which a law firm would face by virtue of having certain clientele would be different from what a real estate industry or a broker or a developer would face. So you must know that what are the red flags. What red flag means nothing, but what are the burning ambers or the kind of things which you could be exploited, or your company or your service can be exploited by the financial criminals, and what are the means to address them. Can we move on to the next slide? And then further to the red flags which come with the products and services, there's another thing. Different kind of customers bring in different amounts of risk to the table. Now, the customer's risk is a risk surrounding the attributes of customer. That could be nationality, line of business, HNIs pose some different kind of risk to certain sanctioned people or PEPs or associates to PEPs who might use your money to basically those can be the proceeds of corruption or bribery and so on and so forth. So you must understand not just the red flags which come up with the products and the industry you are in, but also the red flags which come with the kind of customer, the kind of individuals or entities you're dealing with. Can we move on? Now, we have had a long history of the FIU being established since 2001, and we have evolved tremendously. So much so that initial stage, we had hard copies and letters which had the details of suspicious activities. And then came emails and CDs. But you must know that the only way available for you to file reports is GoML. Now, GoML has different report types, which I mentioned in the slide, but of course, the guide which I'm mentioning to and which we'll circulate later will have the details of all these report types. But what I mean to emphasize on is that there's no other way. You can't be sending us emails. You can't be sending us WhatsApps to people known and LinkedIn messages to people known in the FIU. The only channel is GoML. Can we move on, please? Now, having said that, I'm not sure if all of you are required to have a dedicated compliance officers, but someone in the organization has to play that part. And there are some expectations and tasks for that compliance officer. And here are they.
Sorry, Subodh, they're actually all required.
I'm sorry?
They're all required to have a compliance officer.
That's great. It's nicer. So yeah, at times when I have got messages that I'm the one person in this law firm, I'm assuming that one person who is the owner, who is the lawyer, is also the compliance officer. So that's amazing. Thank you, Mohammed. So there are certain procedures which have to be administered and managed by the compliance officer or the compliance regime. You have to maintain a due timeline of filing, because when your regulators, as Mohammed was saying, that when they'll come for an on-site expectation, they would see that what are the steps you took, what was the timeline, how did you try to assess the risk, how did you try to address that by asking the relevant questions to your customer or to the relationship manager, and so on and so forth. Now, GoML does not have a repository from your end for the reports you have filed. So if you want to have a backup for your own records or for the annual audit by the external auditor or the MOE, you need to have those backups of all the reports which you have filed. The third point is the validity of drafts. Once you decided that you have to file a report, please understand that because of information security reasons, a draft is valid for only 15 days. It's not, so once you take a decision and you start filing, you have to either go ahead and file it within 15 days, otherwise the draft will perish and you will have to start reporting all over again. I would just jump to the last bullet, which is correspondence with the FIU. Now, there are different ways of corresponding with the FIUs, but depends on for what reason are you trying to correspond with the FIU. If that is about any technical thing, which is how to sign up on the GoAML, how to use different report types, what are the fields meant for, and this is after you have read all those guides, you will correspond with the technical team, which is goaml@uaefiu.gov.ae. And if you've already filed a report and if you want to follow up about that report for any other reason, you have to correspond through in-house within GoML. There's a messaging tool which is called the GoML message board. You have to write to us using there's for example, in Outlook, you have priority high, medium, low. There is a field called message type, which basically delineates what are you writing this message for. Choose the most commensurate message type and write to us, and we'll get back to you for any report which you have already filed. Now, technical queries aside and queries aside of related to the reports which you have already filed, any business related query, any operational guidance which is not technical in nature, you can write to fiustr@uaefiu.gov.ae. We'll go on to the next slide, please. Now, you guys belong to different types of industries, right? And post facto, that is after filing or after identifying a suspicion, you need to have different protocols in place that what would you do with the relationship or the activity or the account after filing. So now we also have to walk a thin line about not tipping off that customer or that relation has been reporting. So you need to have the policies and terms and conditions, as in when the person signs up a relationship with you in that document of terms and conditions, you have that option that you can ask for further questions, because at times the case has been that when you ask questions, at times customers take it upon their ego or their privacy perspective that why should I answer these questions to you? I'm just paying you the money, I'm taking a product, or I'm buying a service. Why do I have to answer? So please tailor your terms and conditions in such a way to accommodate that these kind of queries to ask about the source of fund, to the UBO, so on and so forth, can be asked, and the customer would be bound to answer them. So please make sure that the terms and conditions accommodate for that, and also those measures which you take. As I said, that post reporting the STR or a SAR, you can show to the regulator or to the law enforcement that these are the steps you took in order to mitigate that risk. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Now, as I said, that we always walk on a thin line of asking questions to the extent that would the person be suspicious that why am I being asked all these questions? For that, you need to train your front-end staff or whoever is reaching out with the query to the customer to ensure that the question is being asked for a regulatory perspective and not to report, for sure. And these articles are something which you need to peruse through the laws. They are talking about in the event that asking basically gives rise to a fear that it might be tipping off, but in the event of not asking, the risk would exacerbate or fester to the next level, then asking is better. So you'll have to peruse through, or your legal teams have to peruse through these laws to basically identify what amounts to tipping off and what does not. Basically, because in case you did not report and you are citing non-reporting because of the threat of tipping off, you will have to kind of be answerable by virtue of all these articles in the law and the bylaw. We'll go on to the next slide, please. Now, these are some of the best practices, and these might differ from industry to industry. As I mentioned, you have to keep pace with all the outreach, all the notices, all such webinars which your regulator is inviting you to, and you have to keep pace with all the concerned laws and bylaws and regulations to this effect, mentioning compliance or financial crime compliance, and you have to abide by it. I did not, as Mohammed was saying, I did not know, I did not hear that, we did not look at the email, we did not check the GoML message board, will not be taken as an excuse. And then, as I mentioned, the front end has to be, they cannot be just sales agents, they have to be cognizant of the responsibility of compliance to their levels, and also of flagging anything suspicious in the relationship or in the sale to the compliance department at the institution. Rule-based monitoring system or alerts is nothing but, for example, if you are dealing in certain kind of, let's say, precious metals, and recently there has been requirement of anything more bought in cash for more than 55,000 dirhams has to be reported. This is just an example, right? If you are seeing that there is a consistent customer, in order to circumvent this regulation, he's just going below the threshold. He's making multiple transactions at 54,999. So if you set up an algorithm in your monitoring system that a certain Emirates ID or certain trade license number is making transactions, but consistently going more than thrice or twice within a week, just evading that threshold or the requirement, that is a high risk. So based on the industry, based on the products, based on the amounts, you can develop such algorithms, which are called rule-based monitoring systems, to flag the suspicious activity or the behavior of the customer. Documentation and record keeping is something I have already told you. You must, at least the best practices for 5 years, have all the documents of sales and purchases and any kind of business you've had, any correspondence you've had with the customer to ask questions or to get justifications, because the FIU, the enforcement, the supervision, and the law enforcement, and last but not the least, the public prosecution can solicit these documents and they must be at hand. Now, I do understand that the hierarchy might differ and the organization or the organogram might differ from institution to institution, but ideally the compliance section, the compliance regime, the compliance officer must not be affected by the business interests of the entity. So in case there's no dedicated compliance wing, but as Mohammed said that the compliance function has to be there, there should not be an approval solicited from the business head, or in other words, the business should not be able to impose their decision on what should be reported and what should not be reported Because if that is the case, we have a problem and that would be of concern. Role of the MLRO is now anyone who is the designated compliance officer, or we call them MLRO, money laundering reporting officer. We often have the DMLRO. I would say that the best practices I have at least two, because if one is on leave, one has resigned, if he's not attending, there should be certain people in the organization which should always be. I'm even talking about weekends to be approachable by the FIU for any kind of report, any kind of follow-up, right? So while registering, make sure that the mobile numbers of these people are there. They can be reached out by the FIU at any point of time, soliciting any details about, of course, the reports they have filed. Or something I wanted to highlight upon is if there is a feeling that if we did not report, what can be done. Now, FIU, I'll just give you an example. There's a person XYZ and he has accounts with, let's say, Emirates NBD, and we are investigating them for an STR or SAR, or no one has reported that person, but we have got an intelligence from law enforcement or state security, and we are examining them. We would see the statements of the banks and all the transactions. And if we then figure out, let's say in an example of a law firm, and this person is sanctioned, this person is listed in a terrorism list. We see that HSBC, he has an account and he has been transacting from his HSBC account to a law firm, or he's buying jewelry. We would then know that ideally, our expectation is that the law firm should have also reported that person and the jewelry company should have also reported that person. But if we then figure out that this entity has not reported this person, despite it's white and black that this customer of theirs is sanctioned or in a list, or his behavior is abnormal, we would then have to get justifications from you that why this customer was not reported, and you will be answerable. So make sure that rather than getting to that point that you have to be reactive, be proactive, have the right tools, technology, manpower, compliance personnel to flag this and report this opportune. No, not just in an opportune manner, but also in an accurate manner. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Now, whenever you file STR, SARS, or any kind of report to the FIU, you cannot expect, of course, at the time of successful filing, there will be an acknowledgement, and that acknowledgement would say that your report has been well received, and if there's anything further, we'll get back to you. Not for all the reports you will get a bespoke response, but for certain reports you might even get one, and we might even ask you for further details. We might ask you to file a subsequent report. We might ask you for further documents. So there can be different kind of responses to different kind of reports. So do not expect that any response for any report has to be similar to the last one you filed. If you have any query on the feedback, like I said, that any correspondence related to a report which has already been filed has to be done to the GoMail message board. So you will receive a response to the report if you receive in the form of a message on the GoMail message board, and you can reply to that response asking if you have a query. Basically, I'll give you an example that you had reported certain relationship a law firm has, and you said that we have identified that this person is in United Nations Security Council list. And what do we do? Do we terminate our relationship? Do we accept money from them? And if, let's say, you did not hear a response from the FIU, you can use the message board type. There's a message type query on the response, or if you want us to prioritize the analysis or a lookup, you can use that, and you can get back to us about a report which is already filed. Or if you have sent a feedback, if you want further questioning or further elaboration on the feedback, you can do that even on the message board. Anything next? As I said, timeliness is paramount. Anything reported 6 months after the person has left the country or 3 months is of no good to us. Accuracy, you have to ensure that all the fields which are on the GoML have to be filled accurately. There's a reason the field is there for, and there's an expectation that, for example, don't fill XYZ in the address. If you do not know that, tell us that you do not know that. But filling 1, 2, 3, XYZ, ABC is of no good. And so either you report if you know it, you do not report, you say that you do not know the information, but please, by any ways, do not misreport, do not mislead. There's something in the GoML called RFR. Is the reason for reporting. It's a multi-select table. It has around 256 values. So for example, if you are reporting someone for fake bill of lading or fake documents, fake ID proofs, so you have to look up in that 256, you can search by keywords, and you have to choose the most commensurate RFR, right? Because based on what RFR you choose, there's a risk score allotted to a report, and basically on the basis of risk score, we prioritize the reports. Attachments with the reports is when you report anything, there's some basic requirements, the ID copies, the receipt, the invoice. In terms of a law firm, the relevant documents, it differs from industry to industry. In terms of a car dealer, you'll have to report the source of funds, so the loan documents and so on and so forth. So all the documents which you have had at hand about the subject you are reporting, those must be in the form of attachments with the report. The next slide, please. Now there are certain guides. I'm sure that on the UAE FIU's website, if you've gone through, these all are available. Now for those of you who have already registered, pre-registration and registration is not relevant, but if you are not registered, these are still relevant. But for the ones which are registered, how to file is somewhere in web submission guide. This is the guide which will govern the rules of submission, govern the usage of fields. And after reading that, if you still have any questions, I told you to write to those email IDs, and I'm sure this presentation will be circulated amongst you. Next slide, please. So that's about it. I want to conclude by saying that registration was a mandate which you have to abide by, and you have abided by. Filing is a responsibility or a commitment, and I have full faith that you will honor that. But most importantly, and from the FIU's perspective, filing it well, filing it accurately, filing it timely is an expectation that you have to meet, and inshallah, you will surpass it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sabur. That was such a detailed presentation, and I'm sure that it held a lot of insight for our audience in terms of the practicalities of that particular, side of the AML CFT compliance. We are going now to see a quick demo for WorldCheck 1, which is our financial risk screening tool. I understand that we may run out of time overrun. So we will maybe, and sorry in advance, Mohammed Jubran, we will probably try to trim that presentation for to 7 minutes max. And then we will give time for the Q&A, which also would be around 15 minutes. So over to you, Jubran.
Thank you, Sama. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. So my name is Mohammed Jubran. We look after the business development for the financial and the risk business of Refinitiv, which is an LSEG business in Dubai. Coming back to the slides. So now, currently we have a product in the market available for a number of decades, which is WorldCheck, which is our risk intelligence database. It gives you information about anything and everything on the financial criminal activity. We have designed the product in a very structured data from a very reliable and reputable public domain sources, which helps you identify if a person is sanctioned or is on a PEP list, he is on a regulatory enforcement list, he is on a law enforcement list, he is out on media, negative news. So we cover everything on the financial criminal activities by an individual, or you can screen an organization on our WorldCheck data platform. These are some of the criminal activities we see day in and day out in the market, and of course globally. Some of the things we have already discussed during our talks from our colleagues from FIU, MOE, which is money laundering, cybercrime, kidnapping, terrorism, tax crimes, migrant smuggling. So there are a number of parameters on which a financial criminal activity can be mapped on. Now, in terms of the usage of the world check, which Refinitiv provides to the clients, it helps you identify the threats, basically. It helps you to do the KYC of your clients as soon as you onboard them. You have documents from them when you get into a business transaction. Let's say an example of a gold jeweler. A person walks up to the gold shop and he wants to buy certain gold jewelry up to, let's say, anything between, for any value. You can carry the passport or perhaps the Emirates ID. You can quickly log into World Check 1 online and perhaps check if the person is sanctioned or he's on any of the blacklist criminal activity. Refinitiv helps you do due diligence as well on an extensive parameter. So we have two services. One is the World Check 1, which is the product which we give access to. You can log in. The data can be provided in the form of a web-based. The data can be provided in the form of a data file, a raw data, which can be plugged into your CRM system. And of course, we also have a technology which is available in the form of an API. One thing to mention here, Refinitiv does not have any reseller in the UAE. The World Check 1 is only available from Refinitiv from the Dubai office. One thing which is really important, who are the people who are using World Check as we speak? Some of the world's largest banks. In the corporate sector, we have the Fortune 500 companies using World Check data, both in the form of an API or perhaps a couple of login users that we grant access to. Number of government and intelligence agencies, they use World Check on a real-time basis. Now, talking about the data that we have, which is really important, is we cover a number of parameters in the World Check data. We cover 100% sanction list. We have the law enforcement data, the people who are on the law enforcement list. We have the regulatory enforcement data for an individual or an organization. We have the PEP data, the people who are considered as PEP. We have the SOE data, state-owned entities. And also we have the adverse media option in the World Check as well. Now, this is the most important part. The names can be screened in different languages. Like my name is Muhammad Jabran. Muhammad name can be spelled in around 25 plus different ways. World Check AI, the artificial intelligence of World Check, is smart enough to pull all the records which are name matching in terms, if I put just name Muhammad in the World Check. And of course, we cover these 50 plus different languages as well. The presence of World Check is global. The World Check data is updated on a real-time basis twice every day. So every day, 5 a.m., 5 p.m. CST time, the World Check data is updated live. A number of records which are reviewed, and of course, on an average, we update 50,000 plus records on the World Check data. Coming back to the global coverage, it is a solid platform which gives you insight on the financial criminal activities done by individual or perhaps an organization. I will quickly run a demonstration in 2 minutes when we are done with the slides, and then perhaps we will take an example of key individuals, which we'll do a live demo and see what results we have on of the person, how we can screen any person on the World Check data. And of course, these are some key areas where clients and customers, they find difficulty. They can come to Refinitiv, and Refinitiv can help identify the red flags, do the due diligence. And of course, you already have, once you have the access to World Check data online, you can screen the name on a real-time basis. Coming back to the data part, on an average, there are close to 50,000 records plus which are updated. The data is added or deleted based on case-by-case basis. World Check has a global presence, and on an average, there are close to 80,000 plus records which are monitored and reviewed on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. I'm sorry. When we talk about the data and the screening part, the other day while we were in COVID times last year, I got up early morning and saw this news about Hush Puppy. He's one of the celebrity on Instagram, showing off his Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls-Royce, Versace's, and Dolces and Gabbanas. But there was a news. There was a news about this gentleman, and I will share with you a quick live demonstration of World-Check, and we will see what data we have captured about Hush Puppy. So there's a gentleman which was caught by police early morning in the March and handed over to the authorities. Now, if you can see my screen, this is the web-based World-Check 1 online. You have the option to screen an individual. It's a name screening engine. You need to have at least a name of an individual or an organization, or you can also screen a vessel. If we have some clients in the vessel space, oil and gas, on the cargo shipping, you can screen any vessel as well. You can also check the authenticity of the passport as well. Now, coming back to the data that we have, which I just mentioned in a bit, this is the live data we capture in the World-Check data. This data sits at the back end and helps you give you the results when you screen a name of an individual or an organization. Now, like I mentioned about the name Hush Puppy, now these people who are on the watch list, they use different names, different aliases, which World-Check is smart enough to capture these names and give you the results. So now, if I put the name as Hush Puppy, which I have no clue if the name is correct or is spelled differently, but if I hit screen, let's see what names do we get when I hit screen Hush Puppy. Now, this is the exact hit we have about this particular individual. Now, we give you insight to cover the hidden threats. If Hush Puppy walks up to any of the client and wants to work with you, you can screen a name on the World-Check 1 and you get the results. Now, this is the exact name which Hush Puppy was using all his life. There can be different matches in terms of screening Hush Puppy. You can screen a name as Raymond Abbas or Runawa Abbas, Raymond Abbas, different names, but the results will link to this ID. Now, this is the key data we have. Like I mentioned, we update World-Check data twice every day. The very first information we have captured about this profile, and of course, the date of birth was captured on 16th of June 2020. The last update we have was on 22nd of February 2021. He is an individual. There is a pending assignment, the gender, date of birth, place of birth, nationality, and these are some of the locations our team has captured and the data is in front of you. This is the further information that we have on the World-Check data. He is an alleged real estate developer. He is alleged member of Yahoo Boys. He has a dual citizenship, and these were the reports that were filed against him in the news or with different law enforcement bodies. Now, this is the key important things to mention here. He is using different aliases. Even if I put any of these names in the World-Check, the data will be linked to Hush Puppy, and you will see the results exactly which we are seeing at the moment. These are some of the low quality aliases he was using it. Now, coming back to some of the keywords that we have, these are the pending assignments. He has been sent to the Department of Justice in the USA, and USSS, Secret Service is currently working on this profile. One of the things that World-Check helps you cover the connections in the relationship. This is the linked company with Hush Puppy, the Abbas. And these are the linked individual, which you will see on when you screen his name on the World-Check data. Last but not the least, these are the sources which World-Check has captured the data on and give you the results. These are the cash news articles. You can open up any of the results and you can see the screen and you can see the results on your screen. By the way, this data all can be downloaded into a PDF format and can be used internally for your audit purposes and for the compliance purposes, basically. This is basically the World-Check 1 screening, web-based screening option. This data can be, again, I'm reiterating the fact for the companies who are in the technology sector, who have a large volume of clients. You can also have the option to batch upload a couple of names, 1,000 names, 2,000, 5,000 based on the limits of your clients. And you can also put all of those names onto an ongoing screening. So if I screen Hush Puppy at the moment and I don't find anything, for example, but the client wants to work with you, you can enable that name into an ongoing screening mode. At any given point of time, if this name hit any of the list which are there in the world check, the user will be notified with an email. Similarly, you can screen on organization as well. If the organization is listed as PEP or through a PEP, or perhaps it's been sanctioned on any of the list. You can also check the authenticity of the passport once again, if the passport is genuine or if it's forged. We have a unique feature of media check, where you can check the negativity or the news of any individual if it's out in media on the world check media news, basically. This data can be provided in different formats based on the technology the clients have. So reach out to us. We are here to help the clients to comply with our data, and you can be at peace. Thank you, everyone. This is a short demo, but feel free to reach out to us, and we are to help. Over to you, Sama.
Thank you very much, Muhammad. That was very insightful, short and neat. Thank you. And now we are going to dedicate time for addressing your questions, which has been coming very actively on in the Q&A section. And for that, I would like to invite Sabur and Muhammad Janahi to lead the Q&A. Sabur, can you confirm you can see the question?
Yes, and many of them.
Perfect. So I will leave that to you, Sabur and Muhammad, to lead the Q&A. Thank you.
Well, to start with, I see there's a lot of questions about the DPMSR, and I just want to touch upon that. Look, DPMSR is a regulatory obligation for reporting anything above 55,000, and what are the nitty-gritty of it is, of course, time does not allow me, but that's not all suspicious. STR and SAR are about, and by the way, because there's a large audience, DPMSR is a report type for jewelers and dealers in precious metals. But this webinar is more about STR and SAR, and bear in mind, MOE and us, we are working for a FAQ, a detailed FAQ for DPMSR, and all your queries, inshallah, would be addressed in that. But if you have any questions specific to STR and SAR, I would again love to address them, but in general, I would like to just go about it. Now, irrespective of the amount, irrespective of the product itself, anything which you feel is suspicious. Now, if a transaction is suspicious, now when do you report an STR? When the suspicion arises by virtue of a transactional activity. Now, the source of funds might be bad. For example, if you see that the source of fund, the salary slip says that the salary is 10,000, but the person is buying property worth 2.8 million. Of course, you'll have to ask for a proof of source of fund, and that doesn't justify unless he has inherited or he has got a raffle draw. So whenever a suspicion arises of a transactional activity, you have to report where the money came from, where the money went to, what is the money, what is the currency, what is the source of fund. But at times there would be suspicion which arises either before a transactional activity or completely in absence of a transactional activity. Now, as Mohammed had in his example, if there's some bad press on someone. Now, my name is Sabur Siddiqui. I have an account with a legal firm, or I'm buying. My money is completely good, but it's just that you picked up by some of the system you're using, or in the news, like Mohammed was reading news one fine morning, that I am incriminated in UK for a tax fraud, or I'm listed in the Panama Papers. Now, all that transaction in UAE with you is fine, but since I have a bad press on me, is something relevant to that, or I've committed a murder, in good faith, you just have to report to the FIU. No one is asking you to pass a judgment whether that news is correct and whether does it corroborate with that transaction happening in UAE with you. But you have to draw the line that he is my customer. This is what we have dealt with him. However, I saw that this person is listed in World Check, or this person is in UNSCR, or this person was in Khalij Times with this news. And you have to just quote the bad press. And based on the bad press, there's a commensurate RFR, that there's adverse news about this person or about this entity, and you have to report it to the FIU. Here your duty ends, and whether to take it forward or not is with the law enforcement or the public prosecution is with the FIU. But as long as you report in good faith, you have met your obligation, and that's about it.
Yes, can I just add, thanks Sabur, that's a great explanation of when to report. But as we explained earlier, the red flags, the list of red flags, that drives you, that drives your decisions, it informs your staff. For example, all these examples that Sabur just referred to, including whether one of your clients was on a media, found himself in a media situation. This is something you would want to put on your list of red flags. If any of the clients were identified in a negative press, then that should be treated as a situation that needs further investigation by your compliance team and may lead to suspicious activity reporting. So it's important to have that, and that's it. I just wanted to put that back, that the list of red flags and how important it is. Unfortunately, Sabur, I cannot see the questions from my side due to a technical issue, but if there's anything that you see relevant to us at the ministry, please.
Sure. And what I want to also say that is just like the FAQ which we are compiling on the DPMSR, there's an FAQ about the existing kind of reports, the usage of GoML that you'd find on FIU's website. So take some time to visit our website, that's www.uaefiu.gov.ae, navigate through releases and the knowledge section in the drop down, and you will find an FAQ. But I do understand that the number of questions over here are so much that it's practically impossible with the time we have to address all of them. But in general, of course, there are a lot of questions about whether these slides and recordings will be shared. Yes, they will be. I have already mentioned that if something cannot be covered and if the question remains which are pointed into the FIU, you can reach out to fiustr@uafiu.gov.ae. Now, as long as the MOE questions are concerned, of course, there are a lot many. Mohammed, I see a lot of them about DPMSR and the reporting. But as I have already addressed that, there'll be a tailor-made FAQ for that. And beyond that, if Mohammed proactively, if you want to address some of the questions that you think your audience might have, the floor is yours.
Okay. I think for the dealers of precious metals and stones, this report has definitely served its purpose in the sense that that sector now understands the requirements, understand the reporting. And can I just share something with you guys? A lot of the reports that are being filed as DPMSRs may in fact be suspicious, but still this was not filed as a suspicious activity because it appears that the dealer of precious metals and stone, the gold dealer, doesn't understand what suspicious might be because of the lack of the list of red flags. But I'm sure Sabur has saw that a lot of those DPMSRs might actually be in a suspicious activity report. Now, in terms of the real estate agents, that's also a very high risk area that we see, and reporting is an indicator that an entity might understand its requirements and obligations. The lack of reporting, particularly in comparison to the level of activity, even if it's lower than the years before, it's still significant. But if you compare the level of reporting from the real estate sector, it's extremely low, and it shows a lack of understanding by the sector. We have in fact conducted, for example, webinars to list to explain the red flags that that the real estate sector might be exposed to. We also shared those slides with all the real estate entities in the UAE. We will do that. We will also do that on an ongoing basis. But I just want to reiterate that the lack of reporting by the sector might lead to additional reporting requirements, such as what happened with the DPMS, with the dealers of precious metals sector. So in order to avoid, so I'm addressing a sector here, in order to avoid having additional requirements, we need to see that you understand your obligations. Otherwise, you will have requirements such as those that the dealers of precious metal sector is having, and it will be cumbersome, and it will add to your to your operational costs. You know, just to report all these transactions. So I really encourage the real estate sector to start educating itself about the red flags and reporting. And as well as in terms of, I just want to move now to the compliance aspect. Even in one-man shows, obviously we use a risk-based approach. We would not expect that a small entity with one or two people to go and hire a compliance officer. That's not what we're seeing, but we want to see that the requirements are satisfied. Now, how these requirements are satisfied, there are many options that small entity can use a consultant to explain and help them build the systems that they need, the systems and controls internally, the procedures, and then carry out the role of compliance officer independently, of course, while conducting training. But even for a smaller entity, obtaining the understanding, the gradual understanding, it's good that you know your industry. You just need to understand those basic requirements, and that is very achievable. Looking at the amount of regulations at the beginning might appear to a lot of those smaller entities to be quite a long, cumbersome process. But the moment you start building your policies and procedures, you see that it's straightforward, and it will immediately become part of your business within weeks of implementation. It's not that cumbersome, and seek help if you need it. So
absolutely. If you could just quickly add to that point, Mohammed, like you said, non-reporting because of lack of resources and knowledge will not be taken as an excuse. And furthermore, we do understand the challenges because you guys are nascent, you guys are new to the industry. I mean, new to the obligation of reporting. We do understand, but it's already been time. It's been 7 months, 8 months, and I didn't want to mention numbers, but just to give you some context. For an industry which trades billions and has a customer base, and I keep reading in Khalij Times and Gulf News that the real estate industry is picking now. There were thousands of transactions in the month of March or the first quarter. The number of reports from the real estate are less than 20. So that's something alarming. So apart from dealers in precious metals, as Mohammed was saying, that then they were levied a requirement of having an extra report to file. The real estate sector is something I'm calling upon, especially because this sector invites somehow unwarranted bad press for certain sections of the media in the West. Do not let this happen to UAE's reputation. You can play your part, report, find out, and report.
We will
any more questions? Yeah, sorry.
Well, I picked up certain questions about is there any certain procedures with high-risk countries such as Iran? I would say that for anything, like I said, customer-based risk for the product risk, there should be a matrix, which ideally the concept is called the risk-based approach. So have something in place like that. And of course, based on some well-known indices such as risk one or Transparency International, have some legitimate risk score attached to your customer based on what their income levels are, what kind of business they are in, what nationality, what places does an entity have businesses in. Is it a complex structure? Is it